This week, I want to talk to you about expectations. You know, I've said many, many times, like the key to life, the key to having a quality life, the key to having strong mental health is in your ability to be your authentic self. And it's hard to be our authentic selves in the world we live in now. Like there's a lot of pushback on social media. Like if you be who you are, people are going to have opinions about what you said and your belief systems and, whatever. But the other thing, and this predates social media, and it's probably a bigger problem in social media, even though now all we talk about is social media, but it's the expectations that are put on us and the way those expectations begin to weigh us down and the way those expectations kind of move us from being the version of ourselves that we want to be or otherwise would have been. It's actually very, very hard and very, very tricky to navigate. But all of us, from the beginning of time, really, have been dealing with these sorts of issues. And the question becomes, how do I handle expectations put on us by other people? And how do I continue to be the version of me that I want to be when other people, in particularly most intensely and firstly, our families, make it hard for us to navigate things. So we're going to start talking about that today. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie. You know, I started realizing the impact of other people's expectations on us when I was a young person, when I was a kid. And the way that I started noticing it was by one of my baseball teammates, a kid named Eric. Eric was a good friend. Eric was a very talented baseball player. And Eric was on so many of my teams as I was growing up. And he was really good. He was a very good pitcher. He was a good hitter. He was just one of a naturally gifted, talented kid. He comes from an old school Italian family. And Eric's grandfather was always around. He was at every game. He was at every practice. And Eric was that kid that we viewed as kind of spoiled because at every game and every practice, Eric's grandfather would come give him a big bottle of Gatorade. And we just felt like Eric's grandfather was kind of taking care of him. And then we get to high school and baseball gets a little bit more competitive and you got to try out for the team and you're going to make the team or you're not. We get to high school and Eric, he'll miss a practice here or there. Something's just kind of different. Now, Eric and I are still really good friends. And I remember he said to me, I don't love it. So there was a problem that happened. There was this party and the party got broken up by the police and all the people that were caught at the party were suspended from the baseball team for a certain period of time. I don't remember how many games. And Eric was one of those people. And I was like, bro, what were you doing at that party? And now you got to deal with this. And he was like, man, I don't love this. And I was like, then why are you playing? And then he told me that grandfather that was at every game and every practice for all those years was making him play baseball. And he didn't really love it and didn't really want to. I don't know that Eric knew what he wanted to do, but because of the pressure from his family, he wasn't free to explore and find out what his true loves and his true passions were. He wasn't free to explore what he really wanted to be and what he really wanted to do. He wasn't free to explore any of those things. He literally just had to deal with, I've got to just do this thing. And Eric, we lost touch after high school, but I did find out later that he was not successful in college his first go, kind of bumped around in his 20s, went back to college and became a gym teacher. And there's nothing wrong with being a gym teacher whatsoever. But I wonder, had Eric been free to find out who he really was and what he wanted to become, what would his life look like? And I think a lot of times, the weight of other people's expectations, they stop us from growing and becoming what we want to be. And oftentimes families, they want something for you so badly that they don't even realize that perhaps it's not good for you or perhaps it's not who you want to be. But you've got to go off anyway, even if it upsets your family, even if it bothers people around you, even if it makes people wonder what in the hell you're doing. You've got to go off and pursue the life that you want to lead because that is truly and genuinely the only way to be happy. So yesterday, I talked about one of the most early signs that I was aware of that someone was living a life that came from external pressures. It certainly wasn't the only one. And today I want to go deeper into like how you know you're being led by external pressures, and then more importantly, what to do about it. And there are lots of examples, man. Like I remember doing therapy with this client. The client was about 18. He's about to graduate from high school. It was one of those situations where the teenager sought out the therapy. The teenager is the one that wanted to be in therapy. The parents kind of booked it, but the teenager was like, I want to go talk to a therapist. And it turns out the teenager was really distraught because the teenager wanted to go to college and major in art. And the parents are both kind of really successful, educated people and said, we're only going to pay for college if you get a degree that leads to a nice job. So they wanted this person to major in finance. They wanted this person to major in, whatever industry the parents deemed would be something that led to a nice paying job. And their thinking was, we don't want to spend a whole lot of money just for you to get an art degree and be like a struggling artist. And that was their belief system. And this kid was really torn up about this. So he came to therapy to try to sort this out. And today I want to talk to you about how this kid sorted it out and why it's important that we recognize when we're being driven by external factors and then we do something about it. I remember that kid like it was yesterday because he was like, I know what I want to do. I want to get a degree in art. And if you asked him why, as I did, he said, because I love drawing and I love creating and I love painting and I love making things. He wasn't thinking whatsoever about what job he wanted. He was thinking, I'm going to spend the next 4 years studying a particular subject matter. I want to make sure I enjoy that subject matter. And then along the way, I'll figure out how to turn that into a career. That's what that kid thought. And he was terrified that like my parents have told me, if I don't choose a career path that doesn't lead towards or directly lead towards a high paying job, they're not going to pay for me to go to school. And he was really torn up about this. He couldn't afford to go to school without their help, but he didn't want to be forced into a hole. He didn't want to be forced into like, a square peg in a round hole kind of thing and spend the next 4 years of his life miserable. So I had to talk to the parents about like, if you have every right to do what you want to with your money, but it's my job to let you know that if you force this kid to do something he won't like, his mental health will suffer. He'll become depressed. He'll become anxious. He will become a different version of himself that you guys won't recognize or likely enjoy. And there could be some long-term negative and in some cases permanent consequences. Like we can't force somebody to be someone that they're not just because we want them to be. Now, luckily, the parents ultimately, they weren't at first, but they were ultimately receptive to that. And they realized like, we don't want to cause him any harm. We just want to set him up for life. And I had to express to them, well, the best thing you can do to set him up for life is to help him lead a life that will allow him to be happy and the most fulfilled and joyous version of him, to allow him to live a life that would be the kind of thing that he could be really, really pleased with and enjoy what he's doing for the next literally 4 years of his life. So the parents did. They backed off of their claim and they said, or their mandate, and they said, we will allow you to go to college, major whatever you want. The kid majored in art, and not too long after that, social media became a thing. He got hired as a digital artist by some company, and he probably makes way more than he would have as an engineer or otherwise in some other career. And I share that story to say, like, that you're being pushed to do something other than what you're desirous of doing when you feel those pressures and they don't feel like they're moving you in the direction of your purpose and your passion. But always stick to your purpose and your passion. This kid was about 18 years old and he took the extra step of trying to figure out if he can go see a psychotherapist and if that psychotherapist could help him. Like, he had to do what he had to do to make sure he could be who he wanted to be. And look, guys, I know it's scary and you don't want to disappoint people, and this is how you turn into people pleasers, and I know all of that stuff happens. But if you want to have any shot in life at being happy and being fulfilled, you have to be who you are supposed to be. Maybe the biggest lesson that I would like people to get about life, and certainly mental health, is that above all else, you should pursue authenticity. Now, I think very often we think of authenticity as just like, being yourself. And that's part of it. But I think a deeper level, and when you have a full understanding of the importance of authenticity, then you understand that I have to live a life that is congruent to who I want to be. I have to put myself in situations that fits with who I am and who I want to be. And let me give you an example. I know for an absolute fact that I can improve someone's mental health or erode their mental health simply by changing one circumstance, and that is their job. And I'll use me to demonstrate this point. I am not someone who likes the same thing over and over again. It's just my personality, and I know that about me. I am not someone who wants to sit in an office, and I am not someone who's great with numbers. So my personality thrives in the life that I currently live. No day is the same. I see different clients every day. I often travel to new and different cities and places to deliver lectures and attend conferences and lecture conferences and so on and so on. That's just me. So I picked a career and a lifestyle that fits with my personality. As a consequence, I don't struggle with depression, anxiety. I don't drink. I don't use drugs. I don't smoke. I can build a life that kind of fits for who I am. Now, if I had to go and work as an accountant, like tomorrow, I know, and if I did that job for a year, I know some of those circumstances in my life would change. Maybe I'd be drinking. Maybe I'd be smoking. Maybe I would be depressed or anxious or something else. So you see what I'm saying? Like, you have to pick a life that fits with who you are and fits with the authentic you. But for many people, that is a challenge. And today, I'm going to talk about exactly why and what to do about it. Now, what gets in the way of most of us being able to do this successfully, it's not because you're bad or broken or flawed or any of those things. The biggest challenge we have that interferes with our ability to be our authentic self and to build a life that is congruent to who we want to be, the biggest challenge we have to that is actually our parents. Our parents, though love us, they will oftentimes parent from a place of fear. Like, I'm afraid my child will be poor and stressed. So they make decisions to try to push their children into a lifestyle or career that they think is lucrative or will make them successful, or sometimes that is good for status. Like, I want to have my child be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. Instead of having their child pick a career that fits for who they are and fits for how they want to be. It's really, really important that we do this. Like, I can remember growing up, my father wanted me to go into finance, which I cannot think of a career that would have been worse for me than finance. Honestly, like, it just would not have been good. Regardless of how much money I would have made in the late 1990s, mid 1990s, when I was graduating from high school, going to college, and in the late 1990s, when I graduated from college, that was a really popular thing. Like, if you got a job in the financial industry, you were, like, guaranteed to get a job, and you were guaranteed for that job to be a reasonably high paying job, and so on and so on. But that just didn't fit my personality. I really wanted to major in psychology. Now, I didn't know that the ultimate job I was going to get was psychotherapy. And to be honest with you, in the beginning of my journey, I didn't know that that was even a job. What I did know was I wanted to help people. That's what I knew. Like, I want to help people and I want to make a difference. And studying psychology felt to me like a step in that direction. For whatever reason, my dad really wanted me to do that. And I'm pretty sure that reason is because I think my dad wanted me to be financially secure, but I also think he wanted the status of being able to say, my son is an executive at whatever, financial institution. But I didn't do it. Like, you've got to stick to what fits for you. And here's the thing I'm going to say that is crazy. When you stick to, like, the thing that you love, you'll work harder at it because you love it. You'll be focused on it. You'll get better at it because you love it, and are far more likely to achieve a high level of financial success. So it seems really weird that, like, following your heart and your passion and your love will lead to more financial success than just overtly, like, trying to make a financial decision. But that's actually true. So I want to make sure that everybody out there knows the best way to be happy, but also to be successful, is to pick a lifestyle and a career that really fits with the kind of person that you are. That is true authenticity, and that will always set you up to have a healthy life. I know that if you've been here even, for a couple of episodes of my podcast, or if you're following me on social media even recently, you know that I practice something known as solution-focused brief therapy. And I genuinely think that solution-focused brief therapy holds the key on what you need to know and what you need to do in order to be mentally healthy in life. And it's relevant here because a lot of times the expectations that we're living up to are the expectations we put on ourselves. And when we don't meet those expectations, there's this thing that we do that becomes very detrimental to our mental health. And if we could learn to do this thing differently, if we could learn to function differently within the realm of this thing, then your mental health will most certainly improve, and you will become a better, higher functioning version of you. But so many of us, man, we fall into this like perfectionistic world and this perfectionistic mindset. And when you fall a little bit short of perfection, you develop this habit just because you didn't succeed or live up to whatever expectations you had for yourself. I want to be able to share today how you need to navigate this, because so many people struggle with this. And I want to be able to share today how you can navigate this and be the best version of yourself no matter what. So here's the thing that we do. And I'm going to tell you the consequence of this thing that we do. The thing that we do is we set an aim, right? So we have a goal. Like I remember, I've talked about this often. One of the very first goals I ever had that I remember like intentionally setting, I was a junior in high school, and I wanted to make sure I made the varsity baseball team. I've been playing baseball at my high school for a while, and I was pretty successful as a freshman, pretty successful as a sophomore. But I wanted to be someone who made the varsity team as a junior, not just as a senior. I wanted to make the varsity team as a junior. I knew that I was going to have to physically work out. I knew I was going to have to take care of my body in a particular way. I knew I was going to have to eat right. I was going to have to like attend to some things and able to do that. I don't remember how it happened, but I had a friend named Brian Monahan. Never forget Brian. His nickname was Foots, because somebody nicknamed him that because his last name ended in Han, not hand, but Han, and we just turned that into Foots. No idea. But anyway, Brian Monahan, aka Foots. Somehow I talked to him about wanting to work out, and he was like, heck, I got a gym in my basement. I want to work out too. So how about you come and work out with me after school? So every day after school, I would go and work out with him. And I remember it was a lot of work. Like I'd go in his basement and work out, and then I would run a lot. I would jog around my neighborhood, and I lived very close to the school, which meant the like track and football field were there. And I would go to the football field and run sprints, and I would go to the track and jog and then walk home. And I got in really, really good shape. Some of the best shape that I had been in to that point, obviously. And even now when I look back, that's one of the times I was in the best shape of my life. In baseball practice, baseball tryouts come, and I've been working out for a while, so I'm ready and I'm prepared. And I ended up making the varsity team, and the rest is history. But here's the thing. Let's say I had failed. Let's say I hadn't achieved that aim. I set this goal, I set this expectation for myself, and let's say I didn't succeed and I was cut from baseball or sent down to JV, which would have been more likely. What would have been the outcome of that? Like, how would that have impacted me? And I would have probably done what everybody else does. Like, I would have viewed that as like total failure. Like, I didn't achieve the thing I wanted to achieve, so thus I failed and I'm a loser and I'm a bad person and all of that. But what you need to do in order to really be healthy and really be mentally strong is you have to be able to recognize progress. So even though I didn't make the baseball team in my hypothetical scenario, I was still in great shape. I had still built my body up, and I was still really healthy. And I still had another opportunity to try to make the baseball team the following year. So there are lots of ways for you to view things, but most of us, we set this really high expectation for ourselves, and then when we don't meet it, we begin to beat ourselves up instead of doing the number one thing that you need to do in order to be mentally healthy, and that is recognize progress while also recognizing alternative positive things that helped just from your attempt. So in this case, the alternative positive thing that happened, I didn't make the baseball team, but I got in really good, healthy shape. I impacted my body and I impacted my mind, and I did some things that were good for me long term. So if you can develop that skill, then you can be truly happy, because nothing is ever perfect. It's just the way the world is. Nothing's ever perfect. So you have to be able to develop the ability to notice progress or secondary gains if you want to be happy. I know this might sound counterintuitive or even unfair, but oftentimes our unhappiness is rooted in the expectations and the comparisons that are placed upon us by our own families. Over the nearly 20 years that I've been practicing psychotherapy, I cannot count how many clients have come to me less than or like a loser or like a failure, not because they were actually any of those things, and not that anyone should view themselves that way, by the way, but not that any of those descriptors would have been accurate for them, but mostly because some artificial comparison was built up in their family that made them feel that way. And the goal of the therapy was to help them to recognize their own strengths, their own goodness, their own qualities that they can be proud of and feel positive about. The goal of the therapy became to recognize what's good about them and for them to be proud of their own achievements and not fall victim to this really nasty and really ineffective comparison that people do. It's just part of life, and it's part of having a family. And if you are in that dynamic, it's really, really hard to wiggle your way out of it. So we're going to dive into that today. What do you do when what's really bothering you is that you don't live up to the expectations that your family has either placed on you or simply the environment from being in a family has placed on you? And I'm going to talk about some clinical examples, or at least one clinical example that stands out to me from working in this way to really kind of set this standard and let people know that if you're in a situation like this, like, you don't have to be stuck and you don't have to view yourself as negative. Like, comparison is really a difficult thing. So before I get into the clinical situation I was referring to, I just want to give you another example of why comparison is such a struggle. When I moved to Texas, I was in college, and one of the very first jobs I got was at Blockbuster Video. If not the very first job I got, was at Blockbuster Video. And those of you who don't remember, Blockbuster used to be where we would go to rent movies, and it was everywhere. I mean, there were Blockbusters on like every corner. And there was a guy that I worked with, his name was Tony. And Tony loved football. Tony was a big football fan, and he played quarterback in high school, but he wasn't like the starting quarterback, and he wasn't very good. So he didn't really become successful. He didn't go into college. I mean, he became successful in football. I don't know what happened to him actually in life, but he didn't pursue football. So one day we were outside playing catch with a football, and this kid could throw a football really far, really, really hard, really accurate. And I realized something really important. Tony didn't think he was a good quarterback because he was comparing himself to other Texas athletes, which Texas football is next level compared to like where I went to school, which was in Massachusetts and most of the other country, to be very honest. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if he were to compare himself to quarterbacks nationally, he actually would rank really, really high. But he's comparing himself to the top 1% and thus feels like he's not very successful. That's how comparison works. And we have to have the ability to judge ourselves on our skills and our skills alone. So whenever I think about this, I think of this one client that came to my office feeling like a failure and actually verbalized that. I feel like a loser. And I was shocked because the job, the career that this guy had was he was an attorney. And in order to become an attorney, you have to graduate multiple things. You got to graduate high school, college. You got to get a law degree. You got to pass the bar exam. To me, that's a lot of different, successes on the way to becoming an attorney. And he explained, well, the reason I feel like a lawyer feel like a failure is because everybody in my family is a multi-millionaire from being an entrepreneur. My parents are, my mom and dad are entrepreneurs, and they have a multi-million-dollar business. My brother is a very successful business person. My sister is a very successful business person. And I never forget him saying, whenever we get together for family events, they show up in private planes and I fly commercial. And it didn't dawn on him, like, I can still view myself as successful. I'm just doing a different thing than what my siblings are doing. And through the conversation, he realized, look, they achieved their aim, which was making a bunch of money, but my aim was making a difference. That's why I became an attorney, I wanted to make a difference. So they're all successful because they achieved the thing they set out to do. They wanted to run businesses to make money, or I wanted to do a job where I felt like I could make a difference in society. And the criminal justice system mattered to him, and he wanted to make a difference within the criminal justice system. So once you start judging yourself by, like, did you achieve your aims, then you can be able to determine how successful you are. So try not to compare yourself to what other people are doing because they might not be pursuing your aim. Maybe it's up to you to just say, I set out that goal, and did I achieve that goal? And it's different from my siblings, from my parents, from my cousins, whatever, but this was my goal and I achieved it, so thus I can consider myself a success. Thanks for being here. If you wouldn't mind doing me a super huge favor, I would love it if you would share this podcast with at least one person in your life that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to your podcast. And also follow me on all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can search for my name, Elliott Connie, or at Elliott Speaks. That's my handle across all platforms. Can't wait to see you tomorrow.